Happy Easter, everybody. You know, for 2,000 years, people around the world have had this kind of response that the person would shout out, "He is risen," and everybody would return with, "He is risen indeed." So let's give it a try. He is risen. He is risen indeed. That was awesome. Let's try it one more time. He is risen. You guys are amazing. You know, I don't know why. I just started getting a little choked up here as I was watching this because of this. I thought, I didn't say this in the first service. You know, we're going to have around 2,000 people come or take, a couple hundred people today. He's just as risen next week as he is today, right? Amen? And for those that only show up at Christmas and Easter, man, we are so glad you're here. We are so glad you're here. But I'm telling you something, man, I challenge you to come back. And especially guys, I'm calling you out. Dads, I'm calling you out. Dads, bring your kids back. Bring your family back. Raise up, and you may not even know what you're doing here. We're going to help you through that and everything. But he's just alive next week. And can you imagine if we had 2,000 people again next week in the house of God, packing it out every week because we are so in love with God and we want to see what he does in our life. Crossroads, you are amazing. Every time we give an opportunity to give over and above, you show up to the plate, you knock it out of the park. Last week we were talking about a church that we have an opportunity to really help plant a church in Cuba, where they've been under communist domination for so long, and now God's working and doing an amazing thing there. And we had a goal to raise $30,000. We raised half of that already in 1 week. So first of all, thank you for that. That's incredible. And you can still give online and everything. So we still hope that we want to see that go all the way to the $30,000 mark. You know, I love the story. I love the story about the Texas billionaire, and he had a daughter of marrying age, but there were no suitors on the horizon. So he decided he was going to take matters into his own hands. So he invited all the eligible bachelors in Dallas, Texas, to a big Texas barbecue, and they had a great time and everything. But then after the barbecue, he took them to this huge swimming pool on his property, and it was filled with alligators and crocodiles. And he said, guys, he said, if anyone is brave enough to swim across this swimming pool, he said, I will either give you $10 million in cash, I will give you 10,000 acres of land, or I will give you my daughter's hand in marriage. And guys, when I'm gone, you get it all. And no sooner had he said that, and all of a sudden he hears this splash, and there's a young man in the pool, and he's swimming to the other side as fast as he can. The alligators and the crocodiles, they see what's going on, and they are in hot pursuit. And he goes and just barely gets over the edge of the swimming pool, and a crocodile just misses him by inches. And the guys come around, they're slapping him on the shoulder, they're fist bumping him, they're chest bumping him, they're giving high fives, and the Texas billionaire comes up and he says, that was the gutsiest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. He said, which do you want? Do you want the $10 million? Do you want the 10,000 acres of land? Or do you want my daughter's hand in marriage? And he said, I don't want any of those things. I said, what do you want? He said, I just want to know who pushed me in the pool. On Good Friday, 2,000 years ago, I am sure the disciples were wondering who in the world pushed them in the pool, right? I mean, put yourself in their sandals. Imagine what you're going through. I mean, you had been following this itinerant pastor from Nazareth for 3 years, and you had bet the farm that he was the Messiah. You had left your home, you had left your family, you had left your job to follow this guy, and you were so convinced, and everything was just on an uphill trajectory like crazy. I mean, think about it. You watch this guy do things that nobody else had ever done. You're watching him heal the sick. You're watching him turn water into wine. You're watching him feed 5,000 men with just a little boy's Happy Meal, basically, right? You're seeing him just with a word, demons leave. You're seeing him calm a storm and rebuke a storm like you'd rebuke a little kid, right? And then he could speak like nobody else had ever spoken before. He'd raised the dead, for heaven's sakes. And then you see all this other things that you're in the inner circle. And suddenly he has rock star status, right? I mean, he's doing amazing things. Everybody, when it came to Palm Sunday, the whole city of Jerusalem came out and they're hailing him as the Messiah and waving palm branches, and this incredible thing is going on. But that was Sunday. But then all of a sudden, later on in the week, things started happening that were blowing your mind because suddenly he's arrested. And you're going, okay, if you're one of the disciples, okay, he's going to somehow get out of this easily, right? But then all of a sudden, he's condemned. He's not just condemned, he's condemned to die. And he's put on a cross, and you're watching him die. And even then you're thinking, certainly he's going to do something here. Certainly he's going to bring legions of angels and just wipe out the Romans and wipe out the religious authorities and everything. Certainly he's going to come down from the cross. And he doesn't. He dies. Messiahs aren't supposed to die, especially ones you've given your everything for. How many Panther fans do we have? Raise your hand, Panther fans. Let's hear it. Come on, there we go. And I'm going to take you back to a time on February the 1st, 2004. And it was a magical year. It was an incredible year from the very first game. I mean, there was a miracle comeback. It was incredible. It seemed like every game, somehow the Cardiac Cats, they found a way to pull it out. But then even in the Super Bowl, they'd come back and everything was great. And we're looking, all right, man, we're going to pull this out. We're going to go into overtime. And then Casey kicks it out of bounds and Brady throws it downfield. And then they're lining up for the field goal. But even then, you know something good's going to happen. Somehow they're going to miss that field goal or it's going to get blocked and they're going to run it back for a touchdown. And that's the way it was supposed to go, right? And I'm around there with all my friends and everything. And all of a sudden, the kick goes up. And it goes straight through the uprights. And we're all looking at each other and we're going, that's not the way it was supposed to end. Even just, and for the disciples that day, you had to realize that even that littlest bit of hope at that moment when Jesus died, that was snuffed out as well. And not only were they heartbroken, they were terrified. I mean, again, put yourself in their sandals. And the people who had just killed your leader, now who do you think they're looking for? Of course, they're wanting to take you out too. And you're afraid for your life. You're scared. You're hiding. So you put heartbreak and terror together, and that's what they were feeling. Even the women, when they came to the tomb that first Easter, they didn't know it was the first Easter. They had no idea. You know what they were expecting to find? They were expecting to find a stone that they couldn't move. They were expecting to find a Roman guards that they couldn't defeat. And they were expecting to find a corpse they couldn't resuscitate. That's where they were on Easter, that first Easter, because they didn't know what was taking place. You know what they probably felt like? They probably felt like Chippy the parakeet. Now, Chippy, this is a true story, all right? Back in the day, so there was a lady that was vacuuming the inside of Chippy's cage. She had a parakeet named Chippy, and she was vacuuming the cage, and she got a phone call. Now, this was in the days when they actually had cords on the phones. I know for some of you under 20, that's hard to realize. We call it Jurassic period now. Okay? And she bends down to get the phone call, and she hears that. And she sees a few feathers just kind of flying in the air like this. And she knows what has happened. So she goes running to the vacuum cleaner and she opens up the vacuum and there's, Chippy kind of doing this thing, just covered with dust, covered with stuff. And so she kind of panics. So she grabs Chippy and she puts him under the cold water in the sink and Chippy goes into shock. So now she's kind of feeling bad. So she knows she has to do something. So she runs to the bathroom and puts on the hairdryer, right? As hot and as high as it'll go. And they asked the question, they found out about this in the newspaper, and they asked, how's Chippy doing? Said, Chippy's not doing all that well. Chippy just kind of sits and stares. And then the song has gone out of Chippy. Some of you can feel like Chippy, can't you? Some of you know exactly what Chippy feels like, because there's people in this room and there's people who are watching right now, and we're so thankful that you're watching with us today. For people around the country and around the world, we love you and we're glad you're watching here. But you know what Chippy feels like, don't you? Because we've all been there. There's those seasons of life where life just sucks the song out of you, doesn't it? Where you just feel like you're sucked up and blown out and everything like that, and you wonder whether you're going to make it another day. And you can relate to Chippy, but more importantly, you can relate to the disciples at that time. There were two other disciples that they were on the way to Emmaus, and here's what they said. They said, "We had hoped that he was the Messiah." I mean, I want you to think about, they had hoped. Where was hope? Hope was in the past tense, right? Hope was not in the present tense. Their dreams were in the past tense, not in the present tense. Their hope for today and a hope for tomorrow was in the past tense. It was behind them, not in front of them. So what was in the present tense? Fear, anger, I bet, disappointment, discouragement, and I bet you a whole lot of confusion. Amen? See, because what happens on Friday, it sure looked like hell was winning, didn't it? It looked like evil was winning. It looked like the devil was winning. It looked like the grave was winning. It looked like, that's what it looked like on paper, what they were seeing. And again, we know what Friday feels like, don't we? Because every single one of us in here, at least one time in your life, you know what it feels like to have hope in the rearview mirror. You know what it feels like to have dreams in the past. And there's times, and I'm telling you, I woke up a couple days ago and I really felt I was supposed to say this and say this. There are people here that you believe the best days of your life are behind you instead of in front of you. And God's saying, and here's the thing, that what's in the present in your life may be fear, anxiety, worry, discouragement, disappointment. And you know what Friday feels like. But here's the wild thing in all that is that they didn't need to be afraid. They did not need to be upset. They did not need to be worried. They did not need to be heartbroken. You're saying, how in the world? Okay, their best friend is dead. The one they thought that was Messiah is dead. How in the world could they and should they be rejoicing at this time? It's because of this. On at least 3 occasions that we have record of, Jesus got them together and said, guys, I'm going to raise from the dead. And here's just one of those examples in Matthew chapter 20, verse 17 through 19. Now, as Jesus was going up to Jerusalem, he took the 12 disciples aside and said to them, see if you were one of them, see if any of this was unclear, okay? We're going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man, which was him, will be betrayed to the chief priests and the teachers of the law. They will condemn him to death and will turn him over to the Gentiles to be mocked and flogged and crucified. On the third day, he's going to be raised from the dead. Was any of that unclear? I mean, think of it. He told them where it was going to happen, Jerusalem. He said who was going to do it. That's the chief priests and the teachers of the law. He told them what they were going to do to him. He was going to be betrayed, mocked, whipped, crucified. Then what did he tell them would happen? They would raise from the dead in how many days? Was he very clear in? 3 days. I mean, the only way he could have been any more clear is if he said, one of the guys that's going to crucify me, his name's going to be, Julian, and he's going to have this tattoo right here of his mom. That, he could get maybe a little more, but this was incredible. What he's saying is this, guys, on Friday it's going to look so bad. It's going to look so incredibly bad, but don't miss this. Sunday's coming, right? And I want you to think about this. I want you to imagine if one of your closest friends, I want you to picture your closest friend or one of your closest friends. If that person came up to you and said, I'm going to be murdered, do you think maybe you'd remember that conversation? How about if they said, not only am I going to be murdered, but I'm going to raise from the dead after I'm murdered? Do you think maybe that would, you think you'd remember that conversation? How about if you had seen that person raise many, many other people from the dead? You think somehow that would stick in your craw? But instead, not one of the disciples remembered that. Not even one of them put the thing together. You'd think that at least one out of the remaining disciples would go, especially when it wasn't just kind of happening the way he said it was happening exactly the way he said it was going down. And you would think that at least one of them, even his enemies remembered. Right? His enemies said, all right, we need to put a guard at the tomb. We need to put the Roman seal on there because this deceiver said he was going to rise from the dead in 3 days. You would think that if his enemies remembered, you'd think at least his disciples would remember who he said to multiple times, right? You would think that at least one of them would go, wait a second. He was whipped and he was beaten, and he was crucified just like he said it was going to be. And you'd think that Peter would go in and he'd say, yeah, and he said I was going to betray him 3 times before the cock crowed, and that's exactly what I did. And you'd think, wait a second, didn't he say something else about rising from the dead? And others would go, yeah, he said that. And he said, didn't he say, well, how many days? 3. All of them would say 3. And he'd say, guys, Friday, day 1, today's Saturday, that's day 2. We better get up early tomorrow. Right? You'd think at least one of them would pull it out, but here's the problem, that because they did not take Jesus at his word, they were depressed and discouraged and all that things we talked about. But if they had just taken Jesus at his word and believed that promise that he had made, they would have known that Sunday was coming. And you know what they would have been? They would have been like kids on Christmas Eve, that they knew something. They didn't know exactly what was going to take place, but they knew it was going to be special. And they'd be talking to each other and going, how do you think he's going to appear? I don't know. How do you think he's going to appear? What are you going to say to him when you see him? I don't know. I'm thinking things, but won't the Romans be surprised? I'm back, right? You know, things like this. So, but before we cast stones on them, don't we do the same thing? How many times have you been stuck on Friday because all the time Sunday was coming? Can I just make a confession? Maybe some of you can relate to this. I can't tell you how many times in my life I have worried and stressed and fretted and tossed and turned and everything, even though God had promised the very things I was worried about. He'd made a promise about those things. He'd made a promise of his presence. He'd made a promise of his provisions. He'd made a promise of his protection. And somehow I forgot that. And because I forgot that he told me Sunday was coming, I was stuck on Friday. And maybe some of you can relate to that. I want you to imagine if you could go back in time and you could travel back in time. You had a time machine or you had a DeLorean with a flux capacitor, right? For all of you Back to the Future fans, and imagine if you could go back and you could talk to the disciples. What would you say to them? I mean, wouldn't you gather them around and go, guys, if it was on Saturday, guys, I know you're down here. I know you're down. I know you're scared and I know you're brokenhearted, but he's going to come through just like he said he was. I mean, he made that promise to you that 3 days later he's going to rise from the dead. He's going to rise from the dead. You can actually be excited right now. You don't have to worry. You don't have to fret. You don't have to be scared. You don't have to be heartbroken. It's going to be amazing. Guys, trust me. I've been there. I've seen it. And, there's a few weeks ago in our men's mentoring class, Mick Vaught asked a question that I think was one of the most amazing, profound questions I've ever been asked in my life. And he said this. He said, if you could go back and talk to your 17-year-old self with what you know now, for those of you that are younger, go back 10 years or whatever it is, and talk to your 17-year-old self, what would you say to yourself? What advice would you give? And I thought a moment and I'd say, you know what? I'd go back and say, Lowell, someday you're going to see an icon that has an apple that's half eaten. And you're going to hear 2 words. You're going to hear the word Google, and you're going to hear Microsoft. Invest in those things, right? No, that's not what I said. I said this. I would go back, and I would look myself in the eyes and say, Lowell, every moment, I want you to know, every moment you've been afraid, every moment you've worried, you didn't have to be. Every time you do that, it's a waste because God is going to come through for you every time in your life. And it may not be when you want it. It may not be how you expect it, but it's going to even be better than you thought it was going to be. Every time he's going to, so don't worry, don't fret. Every promise he ever made, Lowell, it's going to come true. You don't have to, don't be afraid. And Lowell, there may be times of life, and there's going to be tough times. I want you to know that. And there's going to be seasons of life that are really tough. There's going to be some seasons of life that are absolutely brutal in your life, but he's going to come through for you. And he's going to see you to the other side. And it may seem like Friday, but Lowell, I guarantee you, I promise, Sunday is coming. Because I'll tell you this, there are seriously thousands of promises, amazing promises in the Word of God. That's one good reason why to get in the Bible and read it, because you don't know what those promises are. You can't claim those promises if you don't know what they are. But if I just believed 5 of the thousands, I have them underlined, I have them in blue and green all throughout my Bible, because I like to go back to those promises. But if I just believed these 5, it would change my life forever. Just 5. Here they are. If I believed what Hebrews 13 says, where he says, never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. And that is why we can say with confidence, the Lord is my shepherd. What can man do to me? If I just believe Philippians 4:19, where he said, my God shall supply all your needs, not most of them, not a lot of them, all your needs according to his glorious riches in Christ Jesus. If I just believe that the Philippians 4:13, that I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. If I just believe that Romans 8:28, that God works all things together for good for those who love him and are called according to his purpose. If I just believe Jeremiah 29:11, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope in a future. Do you think if we could just know and trust and believe just those 5, if we believe that God was with us always and would never leave us or forsake us, no matter what the difficulty, no matter what the situation, no matter where, no matter what, and we believe that he would supply all our needs, not all our wants, but all our needs, he would always come through for us in provision. If we truly believe that he would give us the grace, the energy, the strength, whatever it is that we needed to accomplish what we needed to accomplish, and if he said that somehow, some way, he's going to work all the junk together in our life and he's going to turn it for good. Look at this. If he can take the cross, the worst thing that was ever done on this earth, and he can turn it into the greatest thing that ever happened, he can do the same in our life. And if we believed that God's plan for our life was even better than our own plan, and we trusted him that he had good and wonderful plans, if we just believed those things, how different would our life be? Would you ever worry again? Would you ever fret again? Just those 5 things. And there's a person in our, I'm not downplaying the Fridays of life, because Fridays stink, don't they? There's Fridays of life when pain is there and sorrow is there and grief is there and confusion is there. It's tough. But if we just remembered that Sunday's on the way. There's a lady who used to be my spin instructor at the Y, and this lady has put me through more torture. Oh, this lady's done bad things to me. But she's gone through so much in the last 5 years. And here's the incredible thing, that even though it was Friday, and she's been in a season of Friday, one thing that's been beautiful is somehow, some way, she's always known that Sunday was coming.
Hello, my name is Siobhan. On January 2015, I was teaching a power walking class outside for the YMCA. I was struck by a transit bus. No one else in the class was injured. The side mirror of the bus struck me in the forehead and knocked me to the ground, and the front right tire ran over my left leg. I was rushed to Northeast Hospital with life-threatening injuries. I was conscious the entire time, in shock in the rescue squad vehicle. When we arrived in the emergency room, I saw my wonderful husband, Daryl, standing there waiting on me, and I lost consciousness. I had a concussion, a hole in my left retina, all my ribs were broken, my cervix too in my neck was fractured. The same injury Christopher Reed, who was Superman, had and was paralyzed with. My thorax 1 through thorax 8 in my back was fractured, with thorax 2 and 3 totally destroyed. And the leg that got ran over by the bus tire only suffered a fractured ankle. You know why? A miracle. An angel picked up that wheel and it just grazed my leg, tearing off all the skin from the knee to the ankle. Not breaking a single bone, but tearing up my leg pretty badly. Things were so bad they did not want to chance moving me. I remained in that hospital for an entire month. God put the right surgeon in place to put me back together again, with God being the head surgeon. I have titanium rods shaped like goalposts with titanium rods for T2 and T3. After my month's stay at Northeast and my neck and back surgeries, I was transferred to Levine Hospital in Charlotte. It was there I had numerous leg surgeries. Since the night of the accident, I had a wound vac on my leg which kept me from walking, and a collar on my neck. I looked pathetic. When I was transferred to Charlotte, I became conscious. I began to look for the light at the end of the tunnel, and then I saw the unconditional love God had shown me throughout my life. And now I was ready to have the surgery on my leg. God is the great physician, and he put me with the right trauma plastic surgeon to do my leg surgeries. After spending a month in Charlotte Hospital and several surgeries and rehab, I was allowed to go home. I went to my daughter and son-in-law's home to get strong enough to have the final surgery on my leg. After several weeks, I had the surgery and got to return to my own home, where I wore a wound vac for another month and could not walk on it for weeks and had numerous nurses 3 times a day. I did heal, and after my first visit back to the neuro, neck, and back surgeon, he was so shocked my back and neck had already fused. And by the middle of May, I was back power walking, and in mid-June, I began teaching senior citizen Silver Sneakers exercise classes. Life was good again. I felt like my old self, lots of energy. On August 2015, I started not really feeling 100%. I figured I was taking something, so I went to a minute clinic where she said I had sinus infection. I took an antibiotic, and after a week, something else seemed to be wrong, so I went to an urgent care, and they said I had pneumonia. I took a stronger antibiotic for another week. On that Friday morning, before I went to teach my classes, the Lord spoke to me and said that I needed to go see my primary physician. I called, and the receptionist told me he was booked solid. I told her this was an emergency. Why I said that, I have no idea. She told me to come in after lunch and wait. I saw the doctor, and he said, "Let's do some blood work." God had a hand in that too. That evening, the doctor called me at home and told me to get to the emergency room as soon as possible. I had no idea what was wrong. My counts, the white count, was off the chart. I found out that night when I was admitted. I had acute myeloid leukemia. I was in the hospital for a month and a half, taking some of the strongest chemo possible. God always was there. My wonderful daughter researched online what could be done for acute myeloid leukemia. She found where I could have a bone marrow transplant. BMT in Chapel Hill found a match for me. January 2016, I had a bone marrow transplant. It was a 100% match from a young man, 19 years old, from Statesboro, Georgia. I go back every 2 to 3 weeks where they test my NMP1 mutation to see how many cancer cells I have. As of last week's test, it showed I had a slight trace. The lab could barely detect any. Very slight, another miracle from God. I am doing great, and I owe it all to God. Throughout all this, I have never thought, why me? I've had a good life, I have a wonderful family, and blessed friends, and I have always felt I have God on my side.
It's Sunday, but Monday's coming.
Bills to be paying.
Problems still weighing.
I need to be praying. It's Sunday, but Monday's coming.
It's Sunday, but Tuesday's coming.
Family struggling, schedules juggling.
My homework is due. I'm feeling blue.
2 with the flu. I don't know what to do.
It's Sunday, but Wednesday's coming.
Fender bender, my knees feels tender. To-do list, no ender.
Recital for the little dancer. Doctor's call with an answer. Please, God, not cancer.
It's Sunday, but Thursday's coming.
Allergy attacks. Kids out of snacks.
Kids talking smack. My acne is back.
Nukes in Iraq. My whole life's out of whack.
It's Sunday, but Friday's coming.
ISIS is growing.
Hatred is showing.
My future's unknowing.
It's Sunday, but Saturday's coming.
What's next? No idea.
Famine in Tanzania.
Crazy North Korea.
Cartels supplying.
Parents are crying.
Our children are dying.
Yes, it's Monday, but Sunday did arrive.
It's Tuesday, but Sunday, he's alive.
And Wednesday's problems may have their say, but the stone's been rolled away, and Christ the Lord is risen today.
Thursday, just bring it on, because the night is over and a new day has dawned.
Friday's coming and it may have its sorrow, but because he lives, we can face tomorrow.
Tomorrow will never be the same. Hope has won, and Jesus is his name.
You know, I woke up this morning, it was still dark outside, and I woke up to more birds singing than I've ever heard in my entire life, and I'm not joking. It sounded like a Brazilian rainforest outside. And I'm thinking, it was just one of those times it seems like God talked to me, even though these things somehow believe in the sunrise, even while it's still dark. And they, you know, maybe you feel like Chippy, but I want you to know the sun's gonna rise. Maybe you feel like you've lost your song. God's gonna put a song back in you. Because here's the thing, you may have gotten a bad doctor's report, you or somebody that you love, but that's Friday. Sunday's coming, right? And you may have, there's an addiction in your life that it seems to own you, it seems to control you, but that's Friday. Help me out. Sunday's coming. Right? And it may be, your heart may be broken, and you may think you're never going to love again, you're never going to be, there may be a relationship that's broken down, and it may seem so dark, right now, but that's Friday. And then maybe somebody you love has died this year, somebody that you really care about, and you've grieved, and you know what it feels like to grieve, and your heart is broken, and your heart is hurting, but that's Friday. And maybe there's a financial issue in your life and you don't see how you're gonna make it in any way, shape, or form, and you're wondering how that's gonna happen, but I guarantee you it may be Friday, but what? And then you may be depressed, you may be discouraged. There may be a giant in your life right now. And that giant may own you, it may terrify you, and you know it's bigger than you, and it's telling you it's bigger than you. But I want you to know that there's a God that's bigger than any giant you will ever face. That there's even a God that is so absolutely amazing, he can make a little teenager into a giant killer. And there may be a giant right now that is shouting, it's taunting to you, but that's Friday. You know, there may be a dream that's broken and it's on your feet, or you may feel like Humpty Dumpty. You may feel like Humpty Dumpty and all the king's horses and all the king's men can't put you together again. And that may be true, that all the king's horses men can't put you together, but the king can put you together again. Because he's the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. He's the resurrection and the life. And you guys, it may be Friday, but what? And let's hear it one more time. Friday. And you know what? It's not just coming. Sunday right now is here. Amen.